Cool. What we have for today is something cool or perhaps tragic, depending on which spec you are playing. What we have for today are the tier sets coming in Season 2. The tier sets coming in patch 10.1, which Blizzard have released and even already made testable, a few of them, on the PTR for 10.1. Of course, worth mentioning before we start and you start getting depressed about what you're about to hear, that we are likely 2 months away or something before 10.1. Many of these tier sets will be changed, reworked, buffed or nerfed multiple times. It's not really anywhere close to being the finished product. So speculating is what we are doing for today. Let's start immediately by speculating about the Death Knight tier sets. This is our split. We start quite nicely with the Blood DK. Is it over? Is it done? You know, if it was for them, this tier set would be just fine. It gives even more uptime to one of their more powerful cooldowns, Vampiric Blood, not to mention giving more damage to some of their abilities, in particular to Blood Boil, which is good because Blood DK is missing quite a lot of damage compared to the other tanks. Unholy is also quite decent, although not as strong, mostly because of the time it's gonna take to make this work. It's gonna take quite some time and quite some casts of Death Coil and Epidemic to give you all of the stacks you need to get the massive proc. So it's gonna feel quite awful once you have to start ramping as an Unholy DK. You know, it's not that Unholy is fast already to ramp up in damage, so it might feel kind of clunky to get this buff off properly at the proper time. Still, the buff itself is quite powerful. What is not powerful and immediately enters our bottom tier man-made horrors beyond our comprehension is Frost DK. The buff itself is awful for multiple reasons. It's awful because it's going to push you towards a talent you weren't even wanting to take, Frostworm's Fury. It's awful because if you were playing the two-handed build Obliterate for Frost DK, you also absolutely did not want to go this way. It's also awful because your 4-piece is going to randomly proc this Frostworm's Fury, which might be while you are in Mythic Plus in very close quarters, while Frostworm's Fury has a 40-yard range. So what's gonna happen while you are in Brackenhide Hollow, where every 20 yards you look, there are 3 different packs of mobs in Mythic Plus, and Frostworm's Fury goes off without you being able to angle it or prepare for it, and you're gonna end up ninja pulling. So in general, the idea behind this tier set is quite wrong for all the reasons for Frost DK, so it goes to the absolute bottom. Who is not going to the bottom but rather just chills more or less in the middle are both of the Demon Hunter specs. Havoc is good, although not as good because it is focusing on something you weren't even using that much anymore, which is I-Beam. You have not been, at least for now in Dragonflight, the I-Beam spamming machine like you were in Shadowlands. So this tier set is pushing you more towards that playstyle again. This is something we will see quite a bit with these tier sets. Blizzard trying to push certain specs to go back and take certain talents they were not taking before. This is the case for Havoc Demon Hunter. It's not the case for Vengeance. Vengeance is quite used to play down the right side of their talents, the fire side, the fiery brand side of their talent build. So these set bonuses are going to be going just fine for Vengeance. It's nothing too crazy, it's nothing too OP, but it's definitely serviceable. It's also not gonna change and empower the spec significantly, but it is not a bad start for the tier set of Vengeance. What is also not a bad start, and we are not gonna spend too much time on this, is Resto Druid. We're not gonna talk about this because it's completely broken, it's super OP, the 2-piece is out of throughput, the 4-piece is insane, there is not much to talk about a 24 seconds long flourish. 8 seconds flourish and then 16 seconds flourish at 40% effectiveness is just way too powerful. It's not gonna stay like this for long, so let's not just talk about this too much. We also should not be talking too much about Guardian and about Feral. Feral is the least bad of the two, although not being very good. the one that is more bad is Guardian Druid. Perhaps, ironically, the best part for this for Guardian might even be the 15% more trash damage, mostly because of the damage you are lacking as a Guardian Druid and the stacking health increase on the 4-piece set bonus. Still, though, sad to see once again very little addition, very little focus given to Guardian Druid when it comes to magical damage taken, which continues to be their Achilles heel to the spec when it comes to damage taken, especially in Mythic Plus. The last one is Balanced Druid. Now, Balanced Druid is less easy to gauge because they are receiving a mini rework in the next patch. So with the mini rework coming through, we still don't know exactly how this tier set is going to impact the spec. It would be very good if it were to impact the spec now, but we do know in the near future there are some nerfs coming through, especially with the interaction between Stellar Flare and Shooting Stars, so it's not going to be as powerful as it looks right now because of the changes coming. So we are sort of tentatively waiting to see the changes of Balanced Druid before we start properly assessing the power of this tier set. Then you have Evoker. Funnily enough, it's quite solid for both of them actually. They are towards the top. The Devastation one is very simple in the sense that you don't actually get to change much of what you are already doing. You're simply putting a dot on your abilities. That's it. And the dot is going to be doing even more damage during your cooldown, during your only cooldown, during your Dragon Rage. So it's very simple, it's very straightforward, it's just more damage with your currently used abilities. It doesn't force you to go to a different talent path, a different talent route, etc, etc. So it's quite the solid tier set. For preservation, it's also very good because you're not gonna be forced to change talents because of this. You're gonna be forced to change talents because of the giga nerfs you are receiving in 10.0.7. All of those nerfs are likely going to push preservation towards the Emerald Blossom build in the raid, and these bonuses are very good for the Emerald Blossom build, in particular the 4-piece. Very, very good to get free spenders, a couple of free spenders every time you use 3 empowered abilities, because the Blossom build of course costs a lot of spenders. Echo costs 1 essence, but a Blossom costs 3. So to get one for free, you are cheating way more essences when you play the Blossom build, so the 4-piece is very, very powerful. Also, the 2-piece is very, very powerful in Mythic Plus as well, even more so than in the raid. So it's a very powerful set, one set bonus for one activity, the other set bonus for the other activity. It's quite good overall. What is perhaps not good, but at the very least quite average for all of the specs is the Hunter. So you start on the lower end with Survival, which is not a super low end, and then you go towards the middle with Marksmanship, and you finish higher up with Beast Mastery. The one for Beast Mastery is very good. It does not change your talents, your rotation, and your abilities. It simply gives you more uptime to your Bestial Wrath, which is kind of all you want as a BM Hunter anyways. The one for Marksmanship does add a little bit more of a change to your rotation because it gives you more chances to use Killshot more often. So that's the one thing that will happen with this tier set, and also faster cooldown reduction to your rapid fire and to your aim shot thanks to your kill shot. So overall it changes very slightly what you do, but it is still a powerful set. Lower down you have Survival. Survival changes more because it pushes you more to go back to your Wildfire Bomb style. No, don't get your PTSD flashing up because of the memory you have of Survival in Season 3 of Sepulchre and how OP it was. This is not going to make the Wildfire Bomb build as OP as it was back then, but it is still a decent enough tier set for Survival, still not enough to make them very powerful or just powerful in general, but look at it on the bright side, it could have been worse. Another class, which is actually not that bad, is quite acceptable overall, is Mage. So Mage has a clear split between Fire and Arcane, and then lower down Frost Mage. Fire Mage is the more interesting of the three. It might bring back a more frequent use of Phoenix Flames. Currently, Fire Mages are kind of ditching Phoenix Flames inside Combustion. This one is likely to bring it back. So it's quite the nice addition to your current rotation of fire. And talking about fluidity is not something Fire Mages are too happy about nowadays with their hard-casted Pyroblasts and their Sanking Blessings playstyle. Right now, Arcane is perhaps a little bit more weird because it's about spending mana, spending more mana than you do now. The interaction with clear casting, which you basically use to not spend mana, might be a little bit weird how the 4-piece is going to interact with clear casting. Perhaps you might even end in some sort of degenerate no clear casting build just so you can spend as much mana as possible to empower this 4-piece set bonus, but that is quite unlikely. Still, the bonuses you gain to your Arcane Surge in particular are quite solid right now. We will have to see how it's gonna play out, but the first eye test, the first reaction is more or less positive for Arcane. Less positive overall when it comes to Frost. Blizzard is trying more and more to push Frost Mage players away from continuing to just spam Icelands. In this case, they are buffing Flurry and they are buffing Frostbolt. They are trying to push you more towards clicking more than just one button all the time. The overall result is quite boring, it's quite standard and, uninteresting when it comes to Frost Mage. Talking about standard and not that interesting, you have Brewmaster. So Brewmaster is okay overall. It's sort of, Blizzard is trying to push a little bit more on what seems to be the niche nowadays of a Brewmaster Monk, which is I am the damage tank. That's sort of how it's perceived right now as Brewmaster players. So you get more damage. You get more damage to Blackout Kick, you get more damage to Rising Sun Kick. Also, now they are pushing you towards using Rising Sun Kick a little bit more. Once again, something you are not using currently. Blizzard sees that Brewmaster Monks are not really paying too much attention to Rising Sun Kick, so they go, why don't we make a tier set based on Rising Sun Kick? So now Brewmaster Monks, if they want to benefit fully from the tier set, will have to start introducing Rising Sun Kick into their rotation more often. Again, the benefits themselves are not great, they are mostly damage centric, mostly damage based for Brewmaster. Windwalker Monk is perhaps the biggest trap out of all because most players have seen initially the 2-piece set bonus and thought it looks amazing because of the chance to make Rising Sun Kick do AoE. First of all, we don't know the actual numbers, so how much damage it's actually gonna be doing. Number two, this is useless because Windwalker Monks don't use Rising Sun Kick in AoE. You ditch Rising Sun Kick while you are spam AoEing and spinning around like a clown. So giving you an RNG possible chance to give you an AoE ability on your Rising Sun Kick is not going to be worth to use in AoE. What is perhaps even worse with Windwalker is the 4-piece set bonus. The fact that now you have even more RNG with your auto attacks to proc something else. This extra damage bonus to your next 3 abilities, your duplication of your next 3 abilities, which is also RNG. It does not and will not feel nice to have no control over the power of this tier set. Mistweaver is not as bad as Windwalker, but still not that great. So the 2-piece set bonus is completely useless in Mythic Plus and also useless in any fight, any raid fight, where Monk won't need mana. Which admittedly is none, because Monk is like a mana whore, but still. 2-piece not too strong, 4-piece is a little bit better. I have seen a few more depressed Mistweaver Monks thinking this was complete trash, because this one was for the caster version of Mistweaver. Not really, even if you are fist weaving, you're still going to be using Vivify quite a bit. There are going to be quite a few situations where even if you are fist weaving, you will find yourself spamming Vivify during situations of very high damage, so it's not completely lost as a set bonus, even if you are the standard build of a Mistweaver, which is the fist weaving one. It's still usable, it's still doable, but it's definitely not that strong. Then we enter a tunnel of depression, because we have Paladin and we have Priest. So Paladin ends up towards the bottom, where perhaps the only one that gets saved very slightly is Protection, and then Priest also ends up at the bottom. Now, at the very least, for Paladin, you have the saving grace that Paladin is about to be heavily reworked in 10.0.7, in particular Red Paladin, plus the general tree of Paladin. So maybe some of these changes won't be nearly as bad, but at the moment, from what we have seen, buffing something like Holy Prism or Light's Hammer for Holy Paladin is terrible. They don't even want to use those abilities in the first place. Those are not going to be synergizing with the rest of your kit, so it just feels bad to use. The Red Paladin one is also quite bad in terms of damage buffs for your spec, but at the very least, Red is about to be reworked quite soon. The Prot Paladin buff is only decent, mostly because you're going to be doing more AoE damage, and Prot Paladin is falling behind a little bit in terms of damage done, especially in Mythic Plus, so okay, let's take more damage as a Prot Paladin. The Priest ones are also quite depressing. Discipline Priest goes and joins Frost at the very, very bottom because it is an abomination of a tier set. The 2-piece set bonus for Discipline might as well not exist, and the 4-piece set bonus is okay in certain situations, but Priest is quite fixed on taking quite a lot to ramp up and have quite fixed ramp windows as a Discipline Priest, so even after using 3 penances and proccing 1 Shadow Covenant for 5 seconds, does not look like the benefit will be major anyways, given that you don't have, and you wouldn't have had the time to prep for that 5-second window, and that 5-second window would also be very, very short for you anyways. Holy Priest is also quite bad. The 2-piece set bonus is terrible, completely useless in Mythic Plus. It's a little bit better in the raid. The 4-piece is also quite bad in Mythic Plus, but at the very least it's stronger in the raid, because you can let your Prayer of Mending jump around and continuously buff up your next Holy Ward, and then after a whole chunk of damage in the raid you can pop down your Sanctify, your heavily buffed Sanctify from this 4-piece, but it's still not a very powerful set. Similar to Ret, the only one that's not nearly as depressing is Shadow Priest, but that's just because Shadow Priest is also going to get reworked in 10.1, so we don't even know how Shadow Priest is going to be playing out effectively in 10.1, so we technically don't know for sure how this tier set is going to affect Shadow Priest in the next season. Rogue is a tale of 3 specs. You have 1 spec, which is Outlaw, which is quite high up. You have 1 spec, which is Sub, which is somewhat in the middle, and then you have 1 spec, which is Assassination, which is towards the bottom. Outlaw is towards the top because, yes, it's boring, yes, it's passive, yes, it's in the background, you don't even have to do anything, but it's a lot of damage. It's a good damage buff for the spec. Assassination is all the way towards the bottom because it doesn't do too much. It tries to put a patch, a band-aid to the spec, in particular to their very, very little, they're very lacking AoE damage, and it is likely not going to fix much in 10.1. And then in the middle you have Subtlety. It is the more technical tier set, the one that requires a little bit more finesse. It has a bit more power in Mythic Plus in AoE compared to single target, thanks to the 4 seconds extension of Rapture that is going to have more value on multiple targets. It is still overall quite the decent set, at the very least as a starter, as a first iteration of a tier set is not that bad. Shaman starts on a similar note to Rogue, because much like Outlaw, Elemental starts very well, and then, much like Assassination, Restoration goes quite badly. However, where Enhancement could have gone and matched Subtlety in the middle, it's actually all the way down into the trash tier. Elemental is quite good. It feels nice to get a free Stormkeeper every 40 seconds. That's beautiful. It's also not RNG. You can plan for it. It's very, very nice. The 4-piece, even better. You can now, perhaps, with some luck, move away from the fire build of Elemental and start trying to play the lightning build of Elemental. So even better if it can give you more room to play a different build. Resto is terrible because the 2-piece set bonus, it's only gonna hit targets with your Riptide, and you're gonna be having at most 4 players with Riptide. So this is okay in Mythic Plus and trash in the raid. 4-piece is even more tragic because you gain a haste buff, which is terrible in the raid. It's okay-ish in Mythic Plus if you are focusing on damage, and the percentage is pathetic because it's gonna be a 3 to 4% haste buff for 6 seconds, which is insulting to be on a 4-piece set bonus. Enhancement is in the trash bin because it pushes your physical build. The physical build is the RNG build, the slot machine build. So now if you want to make use of the set bonus, you will have to move towards the RNG build. What is even worse is that the 2-piece set bonus of enhancement makes use of Sundering to gain the mastery buff. Sundering is a disorient. Sundering is a CC, an AoE CC that in Mythic Plus you want to be using for stops. You want to be using for interrupts. So you now have in Mythic Plus an ability you have to use for your tier set to gain damage tied to a crowd control, which is not very good. It's not very good design for a spec. Now, in our last couple of classes, we have Warlock. Warlock starts on a decent note with Demonology, continues on a positive note for Affliction, and then goes down to a tragic note for Destruction. Affliction is quite good on AoE, buffing your Vile Taint, buffing your Phantom Singularity, both on the instant initial damage they do and then on the follow-up damage increase. This will make your ramp-up time a little bit shorter as an Affliction Warlock in Mythic Plus, but as far as powering something, in this case AoE, is very strong. Demonology is in a similar angle of other things we are talking about before. Blizzard trying to push you using a certain talent. In this case, it's Grimoire Felguard, which is something demos are not using right now, but they can quite easily go and pick it up if it is buffed like it is with this tier set. What is gonna be to see if it's gonna become a very, very powerful tier set or just a decent one is if you can, with the 2-piece set bonus, reduce the cooldown of your Felguard enough that you can use it, enough that you can line it up with Tyrant, because the Felguard has a 2-minute cooldown while the Tyrant has a 90-second cooldown. So you want to reduce the cooldown of the Felguard to match the cooldown of your Tyrant. That would make for quite a massive burst window of demo and also give them, once again, priority over Power Infusion in 10.1. The disaster happens with Destro, because as I said, demo locks are kind of fine going to pick up Grimoire Felguard in their build. Destro locks are not fine going to pick up Channel Demon Fire in their build. Destro locks, at the very least, the majority of them apparently hate Channel Demon Fire. They don't want to play with Channel Demon Fire, and these tier set bonuses basically just focus around Channel Demon Fire. Not to mention the 4-piece itself is quite weak and undertuned for how much it's gonna take you to actually get there as a damage buff. So just bad overall for Destruction. Lastly, we have Warrior. So Warrior is looking quite good right now. Is looking perhaps the best of the classes overall, because Prot is here and the 2 DPS specs are even above. Prot is very safe, very standard. It buffs your last stand and then interacts with things inside and 10 seconds after last stand. Last stand is not your most powerful cooldown, it's not what you most rely on, but now with this tier set perhaps it's going to be given a bit more priority. What is more interesting are the changes to Arms and Fury. Arms is being pushed to use Slam more, and by more I mean put it back in your bars. Because right now any respectable arms warrior does not have slam on their bars, similar with Fury, they are being told to put Bloodthirst back on their bars. Those are the two changes with the tier sets. The buffs themselves are gigantic. For arms, deep wounds giving you 10% more crit and 10% more crit damage alone is a ridiculously strong tier set. The 4-piece is not nearly as strong, the part where slam gets empowered, but even just the 2-piece is worth enough to make it very strong. For Fury, it's a little bit different. For Fury, the 2-piece just buffs Rampage, and then the 4-piece makes your Rampage mega buff your next Bloodthirst. This perhaps might push Fury Warriors towards basically replacing the execute spam with more Bloodthirst casts, basically, because of this set bonus. Replace, execute talents with Bloodthirst talents and just move over towards Bloodthirst. And in the end, still, the numbers are still very good for the two warrior DPS specs. So these, finally we made it, are all of the tier sets planned for 10.1 right now. At the first look at the optics test, we see that the warriors overall and the evokers overall are the specs within the classes with the higher average rating, and then paladins and priests are the two classes with the lowest rated specs in terms of tier set power. As I said, to finish, once again, most of these tier sets will be retouched, will receive a second, a third, maybe even a fourth pass before 10.1 comes out. So, if anything, this video was good as some sort of time capsule. By the time 10.1 is about to be released, we can come back to this video and then check again all of the tier sets, how powerful they were, and just compare them to the release version of the tier sets and see just how much changed from their original version. So this is what we have been checking out for today. Please, no reason to overreact, guys. If your spec is not one of the powerful specs with a powerful set, I am sure in the end Blizzard will end up balancing all of them quite tightly, quite properly, and make them more or less all equally strong. So with this joke at the end, we can now leave each other on this Thursday. Thanks, of course, as usual, to all of the patrons for the support and the contribution to the channel. You can still support, of course, by doing things for free, liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself, as well as following me over on Twitter, as well as following me over on my stream on Twitch. So, with these social unpleasantries out of the way, I'm going to leave you to the rest of your Thursday. Thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon. And in the meantime, I knew it. This was gonna be a long one. I tried to contain it the best I could.